Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided. This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy is sponsored by Thomson Reuters, providing legal professionals with the intelligence, technology, and human expertise they need to find trusted answers. Products include Westlaw, Practical Law, and Firm Central legal practice management software for small law firms. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Online at thomsonreuters.com. Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the Greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is Life Illuminated. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan, acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. A Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology. Look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. Alan Mill, your host, as usual. And we have a multiple return guest here, celebrating going on for a decade in business, Paul Werni of 45th Parallel Spirits and wonderful 45th Parallel vodka, which I mentioned before we went on the air. I had fortunately had a glass of last night at a restaurant, a local restaurant that makes sure that they have 45th Parallel. And Paul, you started coming here in 2010. You've had at least four visits. Tell us what's happened since you broke ground in 27 till today, because it's an incredible success story.
Well, since 2010, we've expanded twice, and each time we doubled what we were at that time. The last expansion was the most significant because we more than doubled our capacity, our ability to produce, and now we have a significant part of our business where we're making spirits for other companies too, and that helps our diversification.
So it started with the vodka, though, right?
Yes. So it started with the vodka, and then it went on to gin, because that's a natural. Once you have vodka, you can make gin. And then we started making whiskey. And I would say 80% of our production right now is in aged spirits. And we just started this year. We're working on apple brandy, or European schnapps. Not quite the apple brandy that you're thinking about, but more of a European style, French style.
That my grandfather was thinking about. He always wanted his glass of schnapps at night.
Yeah. So that's we're kind of excited about that. And actually, in a little bit, I go to New York and I learn from a master at that type of distillation. I spend some time with him and try to pick up some tips for our own production.
Yeah, yours is an interesting career because you were not born and brought up as a distiller.
No.
You made a calculated choice. You went to Europe and studied for several years before 45th Parallel Spirits was born.
Well, yeah, I've always had an interest in this type of production. You know, you have winemaking, you have beer producers, but with distilling, it's a little bit like both of those, but it's manufacturing. And I felt that that was a niche that I wanted to be in at that time.
Now, there's a reason that the vodka produced by you has won quite a few awards.
Yes.
And give me your take on what that reason is.
Well, most vodka is mass-produced in large industrial columns, and this type of production takes away a lot of the natural flavor from the grain or from the base material that you make the vodka from. Their whole idea is...
Which in your case is corn.
Yes, and so we do it on a smaller batch level in pot stills, and that allows us to retain some of the natural flavor. Makes it a little bit more interesting. It's just easier to drink straight or with over some ice cubes, instead of trying to be an extremely neutral spirit.
And also, I know that you are really a fanatic about the purification procedure.
Yes.
And there was a time, I don't know if you still do, you got all your corn from one source.
We still do. We still do.
Which is very important.
And our relationship with that farm has grown over the years. Very fortunate to have this family farm as our supplier. He's become much more involved. It went to the point where we had to pick up the grain. He wasn't that interested. To now he delivers the grain several times a week to us, and doesn't even really charge us for delivery.
Now, there's something that happens to grain left over after the procedure. What is that?
It goes to, it always would go to the neighboring farm. From where we get the grain, he is an Angus beef farmer, and his beef would consume the grain after we're done with it. Now we just switched with our latest expansion. We have now a hopper where it's pumped into, and it strains off the excess water. And now the farm comes to us, and we dump it into their truck instead of us delivering it to them. So as we grow, it's harder for us to go there every day because we're producing 7 days a week right now.
And this is your second expansion in the last, 4 or 5 years?
About 4 to 5 years ago, we had our first expansion, and then the last...
Well, you doubled the size of
We
the
doubled the
place,
size at that
yes.
time, and now we did it again. We actually more than doubled the size of it this time. Plus, we doubled the size of our capacity as far as our productive capacity. And so this was a pretty important expansion for us. But we're still not done. We do have one more. We weren't able to afford to do it the way I wanted to finish it off. But hopefully in about 2 years we'll do our last expansion, at least for the foreseeable future.
And with each expansion, you're also expanding the brand.
Yeah. For the past several years, we've concentrated on just our regions, Minnesota, Wisconsin, not really trying to go too far out because we really didn't have enough spirits to go too far. But now with our increased capacity and our increased inventory, we went to Illinois this summer, so now we're in the Chicago market, and we just agreed to go into Michigan. So we're slowly expanding out. We don't want to go too far, too fast, because you have to be able to support your brand in new markets.
You don't want to make the mistake that many others have made of too much expansion too fast, which ends up being very detrimental to the brand. So talk about some of the awards with the vodka first, and then we'll talk about some of the other things you're producing now.
Well, the last significant award we won in San Francisco 2014 was we won double gold in the World Spirits competition. That meant that every judge picked it first. So if you win gold, that means the judges, more judges picked you. But when you win double gold, that means that every judge picked you.
And this is against how many competitors?
I'm not sure. I don't know. That would be a pure guess on my part. But it was the World Spirits competition in San Francisco. It's one of the bigger ones.
So you've gone on from vodka, as you said, to gin. But you also make a variety of other things, and not the least of which is bourbon.
Yes. We make a lot of bourbon because bourbon is a corn-based whiskey. And we make our vodka from corn, so we use a lot of corn.
It's called border bourbon. Isn't
Border bourbon.
Right.
Yes. Well, a week ago you had the Vikings play the Packers, and it was kind of the border battle. That's really how it kind of came about. Half the people that work at the distillery are from Minnesota and half of them are from Wisconsin. So we just kind of have it, the border distillery, border battle.
But bourbon has to be aged.
Yes, right.
So let's talk about the aging process and how much of it you're doing.
Well, we're a little bit different than a lot of small distilleries in that regard. We're more traditional. We use the big barrels, 53-gallon barrels that are the standard Ozark, White Oak barrels. They're all charred. They're all new. We can't use used barrels. We only make straight whiskey, so there's a minimum aging requirement of 2 years, but we're releasing at 4 years, and that's difficult, especially on a small distillery level. Our whiskeys are coming out at 4 years, and this at our open house, we're going to have a whiskey that's going out at 5 years.
So that's a lot of storage.
That takes up a lot of space. Barrels. We have about 600 barrels aging right now in our facility, and that takes up a lot of room.
And speaking of open house, today is the 23rd of September, but you're going to have your annual open house a week from Saturday, which is October 1st.
Yeah.
So for those people who get to see this immediately, you can get there for the open house, which is really incredible, and includes tours, and it includes, if you want to make some purchases at the store, and some sampling. It includes all of that, and we've done it several times.
Yep.
And hopefully we will again this
It
this
includes
year.
music, and we have 3 bluegrass bands, and there's a new brewery that opened up next door to us. It's a large brewery. It's about the same size as our facility right now, and they have a food. So they are going to be catering our event.
Really?
And then after our event, there will be an after party at the brewery to showcase the brewery.
So your event next Saturday is from when to when?
Noon to 6, and then from 6 to 10 next door.
And the highway patrol will be sitting right up the street.
Yes, yes. That's why because we're hard spirits, we like our event to end early. We don't want it to go into the evening.
For sure.
Yes.
For sure. So we've talked about the bourbon and the border bourbon, which is becoming very popular. We've talked about the 45th Parallel vodka. You mentioned the gin. Now, what's the name on the label on the gin?
Our gin is called Midwest Gin. It's a very clean, well-balanced gin. It's not heavy on the juniper, and it has some citrus forward. It's in a full liter bottle, and most of it sells in southern Wisconsin. We are redesigning the packaging on that, and hopefully we think that could be a volume brand in the future. But we're taking our time on it. We've been working on this packaging, this branding for over a year now. And I still haven't found something that I'm ready to pull the trigger on.
And other varieties or other products that you are manufacturing now?
Well, we make a rye whiskey, we make a wheat whiskey, we make aquavits. We have about 4 aquavits that are owned by somebody else, but we make them. They're available at the distillery. They're very interesting products. They're aged.
They're very potent products.
Yes. But they get pretty good reviews. And then we have the horseradish vodka for the people here in St. Paul. That is another contract brand. We make several gins for other companies. So we're actually it's kind of fun playing around with different ways of making gin.
So they each have their own recipe for gin, or do you create it?
What they'll do is they'll send me certain things that they want in the recipe. It's really hard for a company to develop a recipe and have it transfer into a large-scale production. So we look at that recipe and then we say, well, we tweak it, and then we do different trials on it. And a lot of times it changes quite a bit, but there's usually some base ingredients in there that are different than other gins. And that's that's where we start learning too, because I get to, oh, they wanted me to use cassis or orris root or rose petals. That was kind of interesting, and apples in gin. They make some pretty decent gins.
And you were making limoncello at one point. Are you still?
We still make limoncello. We're actually they're probably bottling orangecello at the facility right now. That has been a pretty big hit. A lot of people, they don't know a lot about orangecello or limoncello in the liquor stores, but when they come to the facility and they taste it, they end up leaving with a bottle. We sell a lot out of our facility.
And yeah, it's been a hit with guests that we've had in my home also. So
Yeah. We use the orangecello in our old fashions. We use limoncello in Moscow mules. So there's different ways to use them in different cocktails.
now the equipment, switching from one to another, is a really strenuous job, as I recall, in terms of being able to distill something in the same equipment that you used for, say, starting with the vodka.
Well,
how do you handle that, or is there additional equipment now that you're using?
Well, when we make vodka, we have to use a tall column, and tall column allows us to distill at a relatively high proof and remove impurities. But when you make whiskey, you bypass that, because whiskey is a real simple distillation. We just use the pot. So we go around that column to the condenser, and we can eliminate that. It's just switching a few pipes here and there, and adjusting your cooling and your heating. There's a lot of different things that you can do when you want to distill different products.
You make it sound simple, but it's not simple, because I've been there and I've seen it.
Yeah.
And also because of your insistence on the purity of the product,
Yeah.
which, you know, speaking from one who samples the vodka, one of the great things about it, it is so pure.
Well, I think with vodka, it's paying attention to details. It's being conservative, not trying to get big yields, but it's trying to have quality. It's using the proper carbon and the proper, because carbon filtration is a really big part of having a quality vodka. So you have to find the right carbon, you have to have the right quantities.
And you're just about an hour away from the Twin Cities in New Richmond, Wisconsin.
Yes.
It's sort of a short drive. You're right off Route 36, is it?
36, yeah, it turns into 64 when you cross the lift bridge in Stillwater. On the other side of the bridge, it's 64. We're about 14 miles down the road. So it's about a 15-minute drive from Stillwater. That's it.
Which makes it a little over an hour from this area.
Yeah.
In the Twin Cities and the suburbs. Not bad. Do you still live in Minneapolis, or?
Yes, I have some kids that went through the school system in Minneapolis, and I have one left in high school. So we're staying there until he's done with high school. And then I'll be moving closer to the distillery.
And you have one son who is in college, who
Yes.
is going to join you as a distiller.
Yes, he's a business major in college, and so he wants to be an active participant. He keeps on trying to figure out how he can get more raises and have more responsibility, but we're making him start from the bottom.
Now, the barrels that you use to age the bourbon,
Yes.
you had mentioned that they have to be new. They have to be of a particular, what is it, white cedar?
White oak.
White oak.
Yes. It has to be white oak. The important things if you're going to buy a barrel, you want to know how is that wood dried? Because when they cut down a tree or when they cut up wood, there's moisture in it. And how you dry it is very important to the quality of the barrel. You can stack it in nice stacks outside and let the elements do their work. The rainwater will wash away the harsh tannins in the wood. Bacteria grows, fungus grows, and these also break down certain elements of the wood, and then they add flavoring components to the wood. So if you can have a patient air-dried stave, that stave is a piece of wood that makes up a barrel, then you can have a really quality barrel that adds to the flavor. But if you're if you're in a hurry and you're gonna stick it in a kiln and dry it fast, it's not going to be as
you lose
enjoyable.
a lot of.
Well, it just becomes
natural.
more of a holding vessel rather than a flavoring component, and so
Those barrels are not cheap either.
No, and they're in high demand, and they're in high demand used. As soon as we empty barrels, we have people that want them, and we can sell the barrels for what we pay for them.
Really?
If anything, we can actually sell them for more than what we pay for them because all the brewers want them, and we get calls all the time.
So maybe I'll become a barrel producer
They're popping up.
in my next life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awards other than vodka.
Our whiskeys are starting to get. This past year or this year, we finally decided, well, I think our whiskeys are ready. So we entered them into American Craft Spirits competition in Chicago, and this past year, and both our whiskeys, well, we entered 3 whiskeys, and 2, our bourbon and our wheat whiskey won silver medals in their first competition. So we're happy with that.
On the way.
Yes.
On the way. You also offer classes, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we offer classes. We used to maybe a couple times a year, and that's pretty much 2 to 4 times a year. I'll teach a class, but the people that take our class are serious about possibly joining the industry, or they're already in the industry. So they might want to start up their own. There's a lot of distilleries in Minnesota that they've taken our class.
What's comprised with the class? How long is the class? And what goes into the learning process?
It's only a couple days, but they get a lot of literature that we've learned over a 10-year period of time, encompassing pretty much everything as far as different types of distillation. And then I offer about 6 months to a year of consulting, not necessarily going to their facility and consulting, but they can send questions to me, and I'll answer questions and help them get going.
So what you're doing is really training your own competition.
In some regards, but they were coming anyway. they were stopping at the facility, calling and asking questions. So I said, well, I might as well start a class. But I do some consulting out east, but I try not to do consulting in the Midwest.
And the big challenge, of course, is the cost of marketing the product and distribution. And how do you meet that challenge?
The big challenge, yeah, it is. It's cash flow. It's having the money to market it and having the money to have incentives for distributors. Those are difficult things. You have to be creative. You have to hire the right people. I do have the right people in positions right now that are making it a lot better for us, as far as being able to deal with distributors and having a little bit more of a grasp on what's needed in marketing.
And if I'm not mistaken, your son is in a marketing program.
Yes, that's one of the aspects of his
So
program.
we're planning ahead here.
Yes.
so to speak.
Yeah, he has his opinions on our marketing right now.
But that is good, because I recall in the early days, say 2010, when we first started,
Yes.
I would say 45th parallel, as I'd walk into where I buy my wine,
Uh-huh.
and they would say, "What's that?"
Yep.
Doesn't happen anymore. As I walk in to pick up wine, and I buy wine from several different locations, that question is not asked.
Yeah.
It's just,
I think Minnesota has come a long way in the past 3 years. They've changed some laws here in the state. They've lowered some fees, and now you have about 20 small distilleries that popped up in the state, and so that's brought a lot of awareness to the industry. And so when liquor store owners and bartenders started asking questions about who does this and who else can we try, then that's when our name starts coming up. We'll get people, oh yeah, well, we've been to this distillery, and they said that, there's 45th Parallel over there, you should try them too. And that, it's competition, but it's also bringing up the industry awareness.
And we talk about distribution. How do you go to a distributor? How do you find a distributor? How does that work?
Well, sometimes they find you, and they will ask about you, and maybe you do well in a competition and you start getting calls. Other times you will find them, but every state's different. In Minnesota, if any distributor can distribute you, and you can have multiple distributors in Minnesota, and all they have to do is call you up and say, we'd like to distribute you, and you pretty much have to send it to them. In Wisconsin, it's a franchise state where you can only have one distributor, so you have to find the one that works well with you or that fits what you're trying to do. So they're very different. And then other states, you're just dealing with the state.
I remember initially you wanted to open up in Minnesota.
Yes.
But the cost of opening in Minnesota was really prohibitive at that time, whereas in Wisconsin it was like 1/12 the cost.
It was even less than that. Minnesota was $30,000 a year, and an annual fee in Wisconsin is $1,000. So it was
that's much more than I even remembered.
It's quite a difference.
Yeah.
But Minnesota has, like I said, about 3 years ago, they made some changes. Now it's much closer to Wisconsin. There's not much of a difference at all.
Well, I remember after we discussed this, I lobbied the legislators in Minnesota and Mayor Ryback in Minneapolis as well, and saying, why are we letting this business get away from us and going to Wisconsin? And it's good to see that somebody finally heard and listened.
I don't even believe that most of the people even knew that the fee existed. I don't think it was not a well-known thing. It was only found out when you would try to do it, and then you would find out the fee. I don't believe that the legislators or the people on top even knew it existed. And once they found out, they had it changed.
We've been talking with Paul Werni, 45th Parallel Spirits. We are on the 45th Parallel, by the way, which is how it got its name, and a success story of a decade. And Paul, hope to see you on October 1st at the open house, but we'll see you back here again on Access to Democracy. Thank you.